They threw me out of my own family over just $500, but now, after building a billion-dollar empire, they're coming back to me. Stay tuned while I share my full story, and if it touches you, show some love, subscribe, like, and share with your friends and family. In the heart of Accra, Ghana, a 22-year-old student named Kweku Mensah lived with his widowed mother and two older brothers, Kojo and Yaw. Life had never been easy for them after their father passed away, but Kweku believed that education and technology could change everything. He was the quiet one, the kind of boy who spoke less but dreamed big. While his brothers focused on quick money and daily survival, Kweku spent late nights learning to code, using an old, half-broken laptop that kept crashing every hour. When their father died, he left behind a small savings fund. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. The money quickly became a source of endless arguments. Kojo and Yaw wanted to use it for their personal needs, while Kweku thought it should go towards something meaningful, maybe a business or education. But one day, when his laptop finally stopped working completely, Kweku made a desperate decision. He borrowed $500 from the family fund to repair it, promising he'd pay it back after finishing a few freelance projects. He believed that once his work was done, he could even double the money. Instead of understanding him, his brothers turned against him. They called him a thief, twisting the story before their mother could even hear his side. "You think you're smarter than us?" Kojo shouted. Their mother, overwhelmed by grief and anger, sided with them. "You chose yourself over family," she said, her voice breaking. That night, Kweku packed his backpack, a few clothes, his broken laptop, and his dreams, and walked out into the dark streets. His brothers laughed as the door closed behind him. He had nothing left except faith in himself. The nights in Accra were cold and loud, filled with the sounds of cars, shouting, and music from nearby bars. Under a flickering streetlight near Circle Station, Kweku Mensah slept in an abandoned wooden kiosk that smelled of dust and old brick. It wasn't much, but it was the only roof he had. Each morning, he woke up to the noise of buses honking and vendors shouting prices, pretending not to notice people staring at the boy who used to have a home, but now slept beside the road. Days were hard. Kweku survived on cheap street food, roasted plantains, rice balls, and sometimes just water when he couldn't afford anything. But even when his stomach growled, his mind refused to stop dreaming. Every night, he sat outside small cafes, using the free Wi-Fi that leaked from inside. He pulled out his cracked old phone and opened the Notes app where he had written down an idea that had never left him, Makola Link, an online marketplace to help Ghana's market women sell their goods across the city. He wanted to build something that could change lives, especially for women like his late grandmother, who used to wake up at 4 a.m. to sell tomatoes in Makola Market. Without a laptop of his own, Kweku borrowed computer time from a nearby cybercafe. He couldn't afford the full hour, so he paid for 20 minutes, sometimes less. He typed quickly, writing lines of code until the cafe owner tapped him on the shoulder, saying, "Time up." But Kweku always smiled, promising to come back the next day. At night, he worked under streetlights, balancing his phone on his knee, sketching designs on torn pieces of paper. He didn't care about comfort, only progress. Some people who saw him laughed. "That's the mad computer boy." They joked. Others shook their heads, saying, "You can't build an empire with hunger." But Kweku didn't argue. He just smiled and said quietly, "One day this code will feed nations." Sometimes he went days without speaking to anyone. Other times, he helped vendors near the station set up mobile payment apps, earning a few cedis to buy bread. One hot afternoon in Accra, Kweku sat outside a small cafe, his old phone plugged into a broken wall socket, his eyes fixed on the code he'd been writing all week. Sweat ran down his face, but he didn't care. The cafe's Wi-Fi was his only connection to the world. As he typed, an elderly woman nearby struggled with her smartphone, tapping it in frustration. After a few minutes, she sighed loudly. "Ah, this thing won't even open my pictures." Kweku looked up and smiled shyly. "May I help you, Ma?" he asked politely. The woman hesitated, then handed him the phone. Within minutes, he fixed it, showing her how to find her photos and use WhatsApp properly. Her eyes lit up. "Yai, young man, you're a genius," she said, laughing. They started talking, and she learned his story, how he'd been sleeping near Circle Station, how his family had thrown him out, and how he was trying to build an app called Makola Link to help market women sell online. She grew quiet for a moment and said softly, "You remind me of my late son. He also loved to build things." Her name was Auntie Efua, a warm-hearted woman who owned a small bakery a few streets away. Before leaving, she said, "Come by tomorrow morning. I have a small room behind my shop. It's empty, but it's yours if you want." Kweku was stunned. For the first time in months, someone offered him kindness without asking for anything in return. The next day, he showed up, nervous but hopeful. The room was tiny, just a bed, a fan, and a wooden desk, but to him it felt like a palace. In exchange, Kweku helped her at the bakery, cleaning trays, serving customers, and sometimes delivering bread. Auntie Efua became like a mother to him. She would often peek into his little room at night and see him typing away. "Still building your dream, eh?" She'd smile. "Don't stop, my son." Days turned into months. With the small income from the bakery and steady Wi-Fi from a nearby shop, Kweku finally completed Makola Link, a simple but powerful app that allowed local market women to upload photos of their goods and get buyers from across the city. Auntie Efua was his very first vendor. He helped her list her baked goods online: bread, pastries, and meat pies. Within a week, orders started pouring in. Customers who had never visited her shop began calling non-stop. "Yeah, Kweku, look. They're ordering from East Legon," she shouted one morning, eyes wide with joy. Word spread fast. Journalists began showing up to interview the tech boy, who helped an old baker sell out every day. Photos of Auntie Efua's stall and her smiling face went viral on social media. People wanted to know who built the app that was changing the market. For Kweku, it was more than success. It was redemption. After months of hunger, rejection, and loneliness, he had finally found two things he'd lost: a home and someone who truly believed in him. In less than a year, Makola Link became more than just an app. It became a movement. What started as Kweku's dream in a dusty notebook was now changing lives across Accra. Market women who once sat for hours waiting for customers were now getting orders from different cities. Vendors began calling him the boy who digitized the market. His story spread through Facebook and radio stations. Everyone wanted to meet the young man who had turned street hustle into online business. Kweku's small room behind Auntie Efua's bakery turned into his first office. He set up an old desk, a second-hand laptop, and a small banner that read, "Makola Link, the market in your pocket." Every day, he worked from sunrise to midnight, answering calls, teaching vendors how to use the app, and updating new features. Auntie Efua often brought him bread and tea, smiling proudly. "You see, my son," she'd say, "God doesn't forget those who keep working." Soon, news about the app reached investors in Nigeria and Kenya. They were amazed at how a young man, once homeless, had created something so practical and powerful. Emails began flooding in with partnership offers. Kweku could hardly believe it. People who once ignored him were now begging to invest. At a local tech conference in Accra, he stood nervously on stage, presenting Makola Link to a room full of business leaders and journalists. Among them was Zanil Nkube, a sharp and confident investor from Zimbabwe, known for supporting young African innovators. After his presentation, she walked straight to him and said, "You've built something special. Let's take it further." That same week, Zanil offered him $50,000 in funding, enough to upgrade his servers, hire a small team, and expand Makola Link into other West African cities. Kweku was overwhelmed. Tears filled his eyes as he signed the contract. It wasn't just about the money. It was proof that someone finally believed in him for his mind, not his mistakes. With his first earnings, Kweku did two things. First, he went to Auntie Efua and handed her an envelope. Inside was a check big enough to renovate her bakery and buy new ovens. "You took me in when I had nothing," he said quietly. "Now I want your bakery to grow with me." Auntie Efua hugged him tightly, whispering, "You've already paid me by becoming who you are." Then late one evening, he sent $500 plus interest to his family through mobile money, the same amount they had thrown him out over. He didn't attach any message. Days passed, then weeks. No one replied. No thank you. No call. Nothing. That silence spoke louder than words. Kweku finally understood the truth. His family wasn't angry because of the money. They were angry because he dared to dream beyond them. And for the first time, he stopped seeking their approval. He realized he didn't need them to believe in him anymore, because the world finally did. Within a few short years, Makola Link transformed from a simple online market into a Pan-African powerhouse. What began in a tiny room behind a bakery grew into a logistics and tech empire connecting farmers, traders, and buyers from Ghana to Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. Kweku Mensah, the boy once called a thief, was now known everywhere as the street coder. By the time he turned 28, he had become one of the youngest billionaires in West Africa, but you would never know it by looking at him. Kweku didn't wear flashy clothes or drive gold-plated cars. Instead, he poured his success back into people. He built the Makola Link headquarters in East Legon, a shining glass building surrounded by gardens and murals of African women in market, a tribute to where his journey began. Next to it, he opened the Efua Foundation, named after Auntie Efua, to support young entrepreneurs who had big dreams but no money. Every month, the foundation gave small grants to street vendors, students, and single mothers trying to start businesses. Kweku made sure the logo on every grant letter read, "From the street for the street." Auntie Efua became the company's honorary grandmother. Her bakery, once a small shop, now supplied snacks to Makolalink offices across the region. Employees adored her. She was the heart of the company, always walking around with a basket of bread, reminding everyone, hard work and kindness built all this. Kweku often said, without her, there would be no Makolalink. As his empire grew, Kweku invested in schools for orphans, built digital hubs in remote villages, and trained thousands of young Africans in technology. He wanted every child who had ever been called too poor to dream to see that they could change their story too. His name became a symbol of hope across the continent. Journalists wrote articles with titles like From Homeless to Billionaire, The Miracle of Makolalink. But while Kweku's light rose higher, his brothers' worlds fell apart. Kojo, who once mocked him, tried starting a transport business that failed within 2 years. Yaw lost his job at a construction company after the business went bankrupt. Their phones stopped ringing, and their friends stopped visiting. For the first time, they tasted the struggle Kweku had faced alone years ago. Rumors of Kweku's fortune spread fast. Stories of his mansions, luxury cars, and international awards filled the news. Kojo and Yaw would sit together at night, scrolling through his photos online, silent but burning inside. That should have been us, Kojo muttered once, bitterness in his voice. Their mother, older now and full of guilt, said nothing. Deep down, she remembered the night she had turned her son away, the quiet boy with the broken laptop who only wanted a chance. While they were drowning in regret, Kweku was busy building a future, not to prove them wrong, but to prove that pain can turn into purpose when you don't give up. It was a gray, rainy afternoon in Accra when Kweku's phone buzzed. He wiped his hands on his jeans, surprised to see his mother's name flashing on the screen. It had been 6 years since they last spoke. Hesitation and memories of old pain filled him, but he answered anyway. My son, we need your help. Her voice trembled, almost breaking. The bank, they're taking our house. Kweku sat down slowly, listening. For a moment, he felt a pang of sympathy. This was the same woman who had once turned him out over $500, the same family that had laughed at his dream. Yet part of him still remembered home, warmth, and shared laughter before it all went wrong. Within an hour, a black SUV pulled into the driveway of Kweku's gated mansion in East Legon. His brothers Kojo and Yaw stepped out, dripping with rain and anxiety. They were sharply dressed now, suits slightly too tight, shoes polished, but their desperation showed in the way they bowed slightly as they approached. Our golden brother, Kojo said, his voice forced but polite. Yaw nodded, eyes lowered, trying to hide the shame and fear twisting inside him. For a brief moment, Kweku's heart softened. He remembered their shared childhood, the small victories, and the laughter before greed and doubt tore them apart. He even imagined letting them inside, hearing them explain themselves, maybe forgiving them. But the moment shattered when Kojo, leaning slightly on Yaw, spoke arrogantly, his voice full of entitlement. You owe us, Kweku. You used our money to start all this. Now help us. Kweku's jaw tightened, his eyes cold and steady. He had replayed this moment 1,000 times in his head, wondering what he would say if it ever came. Now the words came calmly, quietly, but with the weight of every year of pain behind. I owed $500, not belief, not respect, not love. You took those. Kojo's face twitched, a mixture of anger and shame. Yaw's lips pressed together, his eyes darting nervously to the ground. Kweku stood tall, rain dripping from his shoulders, watching them struggle to understand that the debt they thought mattered had never been money. It was trust and faith, and they had lost both long ago. The rain fell harder, pounding the driveway, washing the world in gray. Kweku didn't move. He didn't yell or storm off. He simply opened the door to his mansion for the first time in years. Not for them, but to show himself that he had risen above their betrayal. He had everything they wanted: respect, success, and freedom. And he knew that no money or pleading could take that away from him now. Kweku had thought about revenge, of course. He had imagined it many times during quiet nights in his mansion, showing his brothers just how far he had come, making them feel the sting of their betrayal. But when the moment came, he realized he didn't need to humiliate them for his own satisfaction. Instead, he wanted them to see the truth, and to see it publicly. So, he sent a quiet invitation, dinner at his mansion. Kojo and Yaw arrived unsure, dressed neatly but still nervous, expecting maybe a lecture or cold dismissal. When they stepped into Kweku's marble hall, they were blinded by the lights and cameras. Reporters had been invited. Yes, reporters. Not to shame them, but to witness what had happened. Flashbulbs went off as they walked, the grandeur of the mansion reflecting every year Kweku had worked alone, every struggle he had endured. They sat at a long dining table, polished and gleaming, with plates set perfectly and flowers in the center. Kweku looked at them calmly, not with anger, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had been tested and had won. When the cameras focused, he began to speak. You all know my story, he said, voice steady, eyes moving between Kojo, Yaw, and the lenses capturing every word. 6 years ago, I borrowed $500 from my family fund to fix my laptop. I promised to pay it back. But instead of helping me, you called me a thief. You turned me out of the house. You didn't believe in me. That rejection," he paused, letting the words sink in. "That rejection was my beginning." The room was silent except for the clicking of cameras. Kweku continued, telling the story of sleeping in kiosks, surviving on street food, and building Makola from nothing. He spoke of Auntie Efua, the small kindness that changed everything, and the millions of lives his platform now touched. Every sentence carried humility and pride together, and it hit everyone there, including his brothers, like a wave. By the time the meal was served, the cameras were still rolling. Clips of the speech were immediately uploaded online. Within hours, the video went viral. Across the continent, people debated family, faith, trust, and perseverance. Comments poured in. "This is the story of resilience. Faith in yourself matters more than belief from others." The boy they disowned became a giant. Kojo and Ya were red-faced, humiliated in front of cameras and social media. They whispered and begged Kweku to delete the video, to take it down, to spare them. But Kweku shook his head. "No," he said calmly, a faint smile on his lips. "Some lessons must be witnessed." And just like that, the boy once thrown out of his home had become the man who taught a continent what it means to rise above betrayal, not with anger, but with grace and proof. Months after the viral dinner, Kweku made a quiet decision. The house where he grew up, the very home his mother had once locked him out of, had been foreclosed. The thought of it sitting empty, or worse, in the hands of strangers, stirred something in him. With no fanfare, he bought it back, every brick, every room, every memory. But this time, he didn't take it for himself. He handed the keys to his mother, placing it entirely in her name. "You gave me life," he told her softly, looking into her eye. "That's worth more than $500. His mother's hands trembled as she took the keys. Tears ran down her face, and for the first time in years, she saw the son she had once doubted, not just as successful, but as kind, forgiving, and larger than the pain of the past. Kojo and Ya stood nearby, silent and ashamed. For years, they had envied his rise, mocked his struggles, and underestimated him at every turn. Now, confronted with the enormity of his success and his grace, they had no words. Kweku didn't offer them control of his company. He didn't know them that. Instead, he extended a hand differently, entry-level positions in Makola. It was a humble start, far from the privileges they once expected. Kojo and Ya swallowed their pride, accepting the offer with quiet shame. At first, they fumbled, trying to boss others around as they had in the past. But slowly, working under Kweku's guidance, they began to understand humility. They saw the effort behind every achievement, the long nights, the hunger, the setbacks, and the kindness that had fueled their brother's empire. They started to respect not just Kweku, but the people who had believed in him when they had not. Meanwhile, Auntie Efua watched with pride from her bakery office, leaning on the counter and whispering, "The stone they rejected has become the cornerstone." She had seen Kweku rise from nothing, and now she saw the power of forgiveness. It wasn't just about giving his mother the house or hiring his brothers. It was about showing the world that real strength lay in mercy, not vengeance. Under Kweku's leadership, Makola continued to flourish. The company expanded to more cities, more countries, and more markets. Vendors thrived, communities prospered, and young dreamers found hope in his story. His brothers, once arrogant and dismissive, gradually grew into responsible team members, learning lessons they had missed in their youth. Kweku never flaunted his wealth. Instead, he built a legacy, one measured not in money, but in lives changed, families healed, and the example he set for generations to come. The boy who was laughed at, rejected, and abandoned had become a man whose empire was built on vision, courage, and above all, forgiveness. Years had passed since Kweku Mensah first typed lines of code on a borrowed laptop outside a cafe. Makola had grown far beyond anything he had imagined. It was no longer just a local marketplace. It had become a publicly listed company, a symbol of African innovation and determination. On the day of the official launch, the city of Accra buzzed with excitement. Journalists, investors, and young entrepreneurs filled the halls of the newly built headquarters, cameras flashing and phones recording every moment. Kweku stood on stage, calm and composed, his eyes scanning the crowd. He thought about the journey, the cold nights in abandoned kiosks, the hunger, the rejection by his family, and the kindness of Auntie Efua. He remembered the countless setbacks and sleepless nights, and yet here he was, dedicating the culmination of his life's work to the very people who inspired him the most. "This is for the small dreamers," he said, his voice steady, carrying across the hall. "For those who were told they were nothing, for those who were laughed at, rejected, or abandoned. Your dreams matter. Your courage matters. Never let anyone make you feel less than you are." Reporters crowded around afterward, asking what had driven him to keep going, what had pushed him through the years of hardship. Kweku smiled softly and replied, "Family broke me, but purpose rebuilt me." His words spread like wildfire across social media. Videos of his speech went viral, reaching millions of young Africans who were inspired to chase their own dreams, despite betrayal or doubt. Stories poured in, teenagers starting businesses, young women creating online platforms, and even older adults who had been discouraged by family or society, all finding hope in his journey. That night, after the ceremony, Kweku left the flashing cameras and cheering crowds behind. He walked quietly through the streets of Accra to a small, peaceful cemetery where Auntie Efua was buried. Kneeling beside her grave, he placed a single red rose on the tombstone. The memories of her kindness, her belief in him when no one else did, filled his chest with warmth. He whispered softly, "You believed first, and that was enough." Kweku stayed there for a while, feeling a mix of gratitude, sorrow, and triumph. He realized that success wasn't just about money, power, or recognition. It was about the people who helped him rise, the lessons he had learned, and the legacy he could leave behind. As he walked back toward his mansion under the calm night sky, he felt a quiet pride. The boy who had once been laughed at, disowned, and abandoned had become a man who inspired millions. His journey showed that even in the face of betrayal, rejection, and hardship, purpose, courage, and belief in oneself could build something that lasts far beyond a single lifetime. The Johannesburg International Convention Center was packed that evening, buzzing with energy and the soft hum of cameras. Kweku Mensah walked onto the stage to receive the African Innovator of the Decade award. The spotlight hit him, reflecting off his crisp suit and calm, confident smile. Reporters clicked photos, and millions watched live across the continent. As he held the golden trophy in his hands, Kweku looked out at the audience. Young entrepreneurs, tech leaders, and innovators from every corner of Africa. He took a deep breath and spoke with quiet strength, his voice carrying across the hall. "Never measure your worth by those who can't see it." He paused, letting the words sink in. "The same people who mocked your seed will one day beg for your harvest." The crowd rose to its feet, applause and cheers echoing like thunder. Camera flashes lit up the hall as people recorded and shared the moment. The audience felt every word, inspired by the journey of the boy who had once been laughed at, rejected, and abandoned. The camera cut to the crowd, and there they were, Kojo and Yaw, his brothers, sitting stiffly in the front row. Their eyes were wet with regret, their faces pale, realizing too late that they had underestimated the boy they once scorned. Kweku smiled, not with pride or revenge, but with humility. He had won far more than fame or fortune. He had won freedom, respect, and peace. He walked off the stage into the cool Johannesburg night, the city lights sparkling around him. The wind brushed against his face, as if confirming the journey he had taken. From a boy disowned over $500 to a man whose value could never be counted. That night, Kweku knew the real victory wasn't in the trophy or the wealth he had earned. It was in the forgiveness, courage, and purpose that had carried him all the way. He had turned betrayal into triumph, proving that the true measure of a person is not what others think of them, but what they make of themselves.